Well, actually, BGS is no longer required. And so they're moving JFO and Ledge Council.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you now.
That's so weird. You're not on this email, Jubilee. That's why.
That is why I didn't get it. Okay, we have 4 people here.
So we need 7 for a quorum, right? So you have 4, 5, 6, that. So we have that. We have
Yeah.
7 so far. Should we
Yeah.
give it another minute?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Oh, is Lily in the room?
No, she's
Oh,
not
Not yet.
muted.
I'm online.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't counting you twice. Jubilee, would
Very
you?
chilly in here today.
Oh, what did you say?
Oh, I said it's very chilly in the room today. They're working on the HVAC system, so there's like no heat.
Ah. Well, it'll keep everybody awake for the next 3 hours, opposed to having it be warm and cozy, right?
Right?
Jubilee, we hadn't connected. Do you want to take lead with facilitation, or would you like me to?
Everyone's fine with me, I think. Yeah, I mean, either one is fine. If you want to go, I think there's more on computer, so it might make.
Okay,
But either way is fine.
sure, I can start.
Brenda, I still don't have it? No. That document from Frank, I tried to blow up
Thank you.
the words a little bit.
I'm a little useless now, and I said.
Shall we give it one more minute here?
Yeah, and I know we're going to be missing Molly, and Chris Loras just reached out, and he is helping a family member right now and hopes to join us later.
Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Other folks can join as they come. I think it would be great to do a quick round of intros of task force members. So I can start and call on folks online to go next, and then we can do the room. So good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Russell. I am the Special Assistant to End Homelessness for the City of Burlington. I serve as one of the co-chairs of the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, and I am one of the co-chairs for this task force. So thanks for joining. We will go next online to Miranda.
Thanks, Sarah. Miranda Graham, the Deputy Commissioner for the Economic Services Division. And I think Lily is en route, if that's helpful.
Sure, go ahead, Lily.
Lily Sojourner, the Director of the Office of Economic Opportunity, and I'm serving as the Commissioner of the Department for Children and Families appointee on this group.
Thanks, Lily. Frank.
Hey y'all, Frank Yanak with the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont.
Thanks, Frank. Oh, we have Sean joining us this morning. Sean, you're just in time to introduce yourself to the group.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Gilpin. I am the Housing Director for the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is part of the Agency of Commerce.
Sean, thanks for joining us. I guess, Jubilee, do you want to go next and then go around the room there?
Sure. I am Jubilee McGill. I am a state representative and one of the members with lived experience. What are you, Brenda?
I am Brenda Siegel. I am appointed by Vermont Center for Independent Living and also the Executive Director of End Homelessness Vermont.
I'll go. Amy Johnson, Vermont Care Partners, representing the designated agencies and specialized service agencies.
Hi, everybody. Elise Reeves. I'm with Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, who I'll be representing today.
Sure. You're just getting here. Take a minute, and then if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Shelby. I have lived experience.
Thank you.
Is that it for the room?
Yep.
Great. All right. Welcome, everyone. The first item on our agenda is to approve our minutes from the October 8th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I have a motion to approve minutes. Is Brenda.
Thanks, Brenda. Second?
I'll second. This is Miranda.
Thanks, Miranda. Any discussion or edits for the October 8th task force minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the October 8th General Assistance Emergency Housing Program task force minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions?
I will abstain, having not been there. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sean. Great. All right, our minutes are approved. Moving into our next agenda item is our public forum. Are there folks who are wishing to speak during public forum who are present today, either online or in the room?
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Griffin. I'm an attorney at Vermont Legal Aid.
Do you know some stuff here?
Where do you want me to go?
At the end, kind of at the there.
And we heard you're from Vermont Legal Aid, but I didn't catch your name.
Mary Ellen Griffin.
Okay.
Hi, Mary Ellen.
You wanna
Thank you.
sit? Or-
Sit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you can stand.
Well, I've had a couple cases in a row now where people are approved for emergency housing, but can't get a place because they're on a do not rent list for a situation that they dispute, and that also like seems pretty minor. And the latest one, it seemed like the hotels were sharing do not rent lists so that you can get in anywhere. So I'm just wondering if there's anything being done about this, if there's anything I can do for my client, if anyone here has a suggestion of something a person in this situation can do, and like people, if they've been on it for something that happened last February. So, you know, it's like, do I just call the hotel and say like, hey, like, can we talk about this? There's some way to solve this, and it will just, so that's my comment is, A, is everybody aware this is happening? And B, is there anything to be done?
Okay.
Thanks, Mary Ellen, for your comment.
Is
Are
it
there
possible to
other?
talk about it? No.
Yeah, well, let's see if there's any other comment. And then since we have some time, is that okay with you, Sarah, if we?
Sure. Yep. Do we think that this will fit into any of our agenda items today?
Yeah,
One of them is, or for discussion, we're looking at program eligibility, program requirements and adverse weather conditions, and then have some time on the agenda for new recommendations and discussions. I feel like this discussion could probably fit into any of those.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Back to it.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. Are there others either in the room or online who are here to provide public comment?
There doesn't
Okay.
appear to be any here.
Okay, hearing none, we will go ahead and close public forum. Next up is to do a quick assessment of our project or our progress on the directives for this task force. I think we're going to get into, dive into deeper conversation a little bit later, but this felt like a bit of a helpful exercise last time that we met to sort of level set. And I know, Sean, I'm not sure how, hopefully you have been just devouring our meeting minutes, even though you haven't been able to join us. So you are caught up to speed and ready to jump in, but it might just be good for us to do some level setting before we dive into conversation this morning. So that being said, Frank, are you able to share your screen with those? I can find them too if that would if you got it. Okay. Thanks, Frank. Did everyone see that?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Got it.
Frank, would you mind making it just a little bit bigger? Thank you. And I'll also take this first. Okay.
This is for reference.
At this time, please feel free to leave me a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. If this is a guardianship emergency.
Okay. Thanks for muting. So this spreadsheet has also been sent out as part of, along with the agenda. Well, actually, it was sent out along with the agenda, but it is also posted on the DCF website as well. And I can put that link in the chat for anyone who wants to look at that on your own time. Okay. So looking at the spreadsheet here, we have made some progress on
Able to take your call at this.
Oh goodness. I'm not sure who that is. Okay. So we have made some progress on working through some of these directives. The first around household eligibility. While we don't have firm agreements, some folks indicated that they wanted to wait until they could see the whole sort of package together here before expressing, agreement with this. But we had some agreement around the 60 years of age or older.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to.
We're going to talk
at this time.
Oh my goodness.
Please feel free to leave.
Heidi, you keep going off mute and we hear a voicemail message.
I wonder if she's trying to join via phone or audio.
Okay.
Okay. We are going to have some discussion today around the how disability is determined and documented. We talked about What else? I'm looking down here. Those are all related to disability. So number 3 is we talked about experiencing short-term medical condition or has been discharged from a health facility within the last few days. We have some more discussion around that. We talked about changing last month the age to align with the HUD youth definition. So instead of 19 years of age, is it would be I think was it up to Julie, was it up to age 23 or 24 actually?
It depends on which kind of standard we want to
Okay.
use. There's the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project, which is up to 24, or our Youth Demonstration Project, which is kind of like Vermont's extended foster care, which is to 22. So,
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually 2 things we could consider there.
Okay. We also talked about number 5, which is shifting from someone in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy to someone who is pregnant. There was some agreement around the household having experienced death of a spouse or domestic partner. There was discussion around household having experience of natural disaster, or if they have a constructive eviction, and additionally around households experiencing domestic violence, which does fall under one of our categories for discussion today. I think, yeah,
just about that, that would be, so it probably would be its own category, not a child under 19 years for that specific like age range, like 19 to 22 or up to 24, would be youth who are their own household. So these are youth who are homeless, unaccompanied minors as children, or in the justice system or foster care system. And often are the ones most likely to go on to chronic homelessness as, once they're adults for the rest of their adult life. So it wouldn't be like entire families with these youth in them. They're kind of that population of youth and young adults in Vermont who really don't have the benefit of family support like a lot of us do. Or parental guidance. Yeah.
Understood, Jubilee. That is an important distinction. So this would be a separate category for them being unaccompanied.
Yes.
Got it.
Would it be 19 to 24 since we already have in 19 up
It'd
to
be
19?
20, yeah, 20 to 24.
20 to 24. Okay.
Okay.
Wait, where did my notes go? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Should be on mute.
Next on up for discussion is program requirements. I'm just going to run through this pretty quickly, where we have some agreement, and we're hoping to discuss. I have multiple screens open here. We're hoping to discuss specifically income contribution. We also are gonna have some more focused conversation today on specifically the income contribution related to self-pay days and development of a potential sort of savings escrow for households that are in this program. We'll also be talking about engagement with coordinated entry. And then lastly, the adverse weather conditions is something that we have not really had much time for focus today on, but that is where we will, that will be part of our discussion today. Are there questions around this spreadsheet that Frank's sharing here, that folks had after sort of reviewing our progress to date?
I was wondering if there's, we shared some recommendations. I don't know if they got to everybody. We shared some this morning, but we also shared some last meeting. And I'm just wanting to make sure that they did get to everybody. And if not, I can send those around as well right now.
You said, what were can you remind me of the recommendations that, wait, did you send recommendations from did you say the last meeting or the last week?
No, the last meeting, we shared some recommendations and we did give them to folks, but I'm not sure if they got to people in the email that were around room cap, case management, coordinated entry, eligibility, and provider supports. And if you want, I can resend them if people did not, if not everyone did seem to receive them. Is that helpful? Just knowing that I sent an amended income contribution one based on the discussion we had last time this morning. But the rest of them are still there and I don't see them necessarily included in that spreadsheet.
Did you send them to, I'm looking on the website and I'm not sure that they're posted on the website. All I'm seeing from the October 8th meeting is the agenda, meeting minutes, and the recording. Could you send that to Monica so that she is able to post that on the post that online?
Yes, absolutely. We'll do that right now. But I just wanted to make sure because some of those recommendations are in the things we're discussing today. So I'll send them on to everybody as well.
Okay. And as those things come up, Brenda, it might be if you could point us toward that direction, toward that, document. Sure. That would be great. Just to highlight that. Okay. Great. All right. Anything else? Oh, Miranda, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to clarify that right now, it's just more of like, we're acknowledging that we see this and we're going to have actual discussion about some components because, as you might imagine, the administration has some thoughts about some of these recommendations. And so I just want to be clear about now it's not that time. We're going to dive into things more. And then as we would actually be putting forward a recommendation, then we would kind of dive into language. Just for example of, the note that we just added, it's not nearly enough for us to say okay, every 20 to 24-year-old would be added in. There would need to be something more, or is it just that simple of that would be, what the recommendation is. So I just wanted to be clear so that we aren't missing an opportunity or I am, properly holding until later.
No, Miranda, I think that's a good point and a great segue into our discussion on program eligibility. I had tried to sort of list out spots from the spreadsheet that Frank just shared of the areas where we still needed to talk more, but certainly that youth piece can be discussed. So as we move into that right now and discussing program eligibility, do you want to start that conversation?
Yes. Happy to do that. So you want me to start with the youth, because I think I've thoughts on some other pieces of that program eligibility, in which I think you had acknowledged that wanting to see it as a package, and there still are some components that I think aren't necessarily there. But and please jump in, Nicole, if I don't quite get this right, but I think for us to be able to determine eligibility in economic services, we need really clear understanding there is a body of workers that need to be able to determine this. So what is it? How do we determine if a 20 to 24-year-old, if that was something that we added in, would be eligible? And then for us, also acknowledging how big do we think that universe might be, because there's a budgetary implication. And I know that we haven't been putting budgetary pieces here, but a lot of these things, anytime you're adding a group, expanding the age, there are budgetary implications, and then also just capacity implications, which then I think impacts the bigger whole.
I do know if we only consider the kind of YDP youth, so youth who are exiting our foster care systems, and in that category right about now, my understanding is there's about 72 Vermont young adults that category would encompass who are eligible for things like vouchers through the YDP program and YDHP, but there's not currently either places to use those resources or ones available for them. So they're kind of floundering, and we know that this population, like I said, is most likely to go on to be chronically homeless as adults. They're more likely to end up in situations where they are trafficked and get into really scary, dangerous situations. It's something we don't talk a lot about in Vermont, but it is happening more and more, and these are the youth who are most vulnerable to these things. Got a spaceship taking off. So yeah, so that for that specific population, I'd have to circle up with the COC to get the kind of broader current. We're working on all of our end of year data reports right now with VCRIP to kind of get a better understanding, but need to also talk with the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance to compile that data of what it would mean to add that additional kind of 20 to 24 unaccompanied youth and young adults. Teresa?
I'm just wondering, I see we had Sean on the meeting today, and I'm just wondering, we added this language for this particular group of people to the housing. I'm trying to remember if it was in VHIP or VHIP2. And I'm just wondering if Sean, I know it's kind of early because it's only October, but whether or not you've had any experience, you know, in terms of real numbers there.
Excuse me. And once again, Sean Gilpin with the Department of Housing and Community Development. So VHIP for those who might not be familiar, or for those who are online, is the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. It's a program that we're running to provide grants to small property owners in order to bring units back online. And eligible use is not only people exiting homelessness, but we recently had some expansion to allow for youth that might not fit the HUD definition of homelessness to be eligible for said units. I will candidly admit we have very few. It's been really early days of trying to figure out how to make the connections with youth homelessness organizations as a referral agency. And we're trying to work that into the standard practice. But we have to date, not to my knowledge, I don't think we have any units that are addressing a youth homelessness, but they are eligible candidates for tenancy. Did that answer the question?
It does answer my question, and I'm going to say, Sean, meet Jubilee. Jubilee, meet Sean, because she can help you with that.
All right.
Me too.
Let's yeah, I'm not hard to find, Jubilee, and we I feel like we might have interacted before, but I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you. My contact is just my name, sean.gilpin@vermont.gov, and you can find that all over our website. So
Sounds good.
great.
Miranda, oh, Frank, go ahead. I had a question for Miranda, but I don't see her now.
I was just wondering, do you want me to keep the screen up and shared while we're having these discussions, or do you want me just to pull it up as if we're like specifically talking about language? Just
From my
'cause I know
perspective,
that-
it would be helpful to pull it up when we're specifically talking about language, because it's really difficult to see when folks have their hand raised, and I don't want to miss anyone.
Okay, that's what I figured. So just let me know when you want it up, and I'll reshare.
Okay, thanks.
Brenda has had her hand up too.
Oh,
I just have a question. I feel we're going through the eligibility criteria. It seems like it makes sense to go through the ones where we had questions and discussions one at a time, not just the whole, like, I think each of us could lodge a list of things that we're not sure we feel comfortable with, but like going through each one to try to talk through them. It seems, is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we try to do. And
Yeah.
then folks, some folks aren't willing or able to commit, like by going line by line,
Yeah.
so we're kind of at an impasse on how we proceed. We have these groups that, so I think trying to just go through the issues people see and maybe we can address those and then come to a collective consensus, or not around it as a total package.
Miranda, did you have other, you mentioned the youth, but you also mentioned other thoughts on eligibility, and I didn't know if you were finished sharing.
Yep, happy to go. And thank you. I think that was helpful, Jubilee, to capture more about who you were thinking, like specifically the YDP youth. It seems as though there would be organizations, there would be some easy way for ESD to verify this if in fact that became an eligibility category. Excuse me. I think the other piece, right, is I don't know that, I guess we just have to acknowledge the fact, you know, the decreasing the age again back to 60 has implications, both budgetary and as well as capacity, right? You're adding more people in that, and we aren't able to house everyone. So that's just understanding. And I know that we've had that conversation a bit as well about the more people that we say have eligibility, but we aren't able to house everyone, and people don't want to prioritize, but it's just like an understanding that we can add more, but if you don't have capacity, you're still not actually serving all the households. I think around the disability, there is still, for the division, the ADA definition, it's not clear enough like what we would be looking for documentation in ESD, and that is something that we need to be able to verify. And then there was, I think in E, it said like, or other documentation that's cited that's pretty open, and so also leaves a lot of room for interpretation, which we also try to not dive into. And then I think there was the very last piece on the disability was just said that the agency shall not gather any medical information beyond what's included above. So, and I think we need to be able to verify that someone they fit in some way. They either have the SSI, the SSDI, they have the 2-1 GBR. We aren't always given complete 2-1 GBRs. So, you know, it's just, we don't want to be limited either in being able to determine that folks are able to access the program. Do you want me to keep going, or should I pause and just see?
Does anyone respond, Brenda?
I'd like to respond about the definition of disability. I think that the 201 GVR with a medical provider filling it out is the verification. And then we've also added those other verifications that were in, I'm going to forget the bill number, in the Health Human Services bill. And so I don't think there necessarily needs to be more than that. And if a medical provider has verified that they have a disability that they feel warrants needing to be sheltered, that's the addition to having the ADA definition in there. And so I don't think any of us are more qualified than a medical provider and their patient to determine that. And so the 201 GBR allows for that in addition to the Social Security and the other places that we thought. And I think that the way it is currently with those additional verification options that were put into the House Human Services bill with the ADA definition would resolve several of the challenges that we have, including where challenges come in rules around disabilities and other pieces. So I think just adding the ADA definition resolves a lot of where we see concerns without doing a lot more. And again, there's a medical provider looking at that, and I don't think any of us are more qualified than the medical provider and their patient, just like other issues that we see. And I will add that I think I mentioned last time that Sarah the executive director of VCIL had named that she was a little uncomfortable with it only being medical providers, but I've talked to her since, and she is now comfortable with medical providers being the only people that can fill out the 201 GDR.
I am just going to jump back in. I think for us in that, and thank you, Brenda. I'm trying to follow because I think like if the 201 GVR is meeting the needs, I'm not sure what other medical documentation we would. I guess that it seems like it's opening it up and say like it could be other things as opposed to no, it's this form which gives us, as it's like we have the medical provider's name. They're also giving us information about how long someone's disability might be, which I think gets into like there was another thing of like if someone's experiencing a short-term medical issue that was also in there. Like does that need to be in there if we're saying like a medical professional can complete a 2-1 GVR and they're telling economic services how long this is going to last, understanding that can also change, like somebody's condition can take a turn for the worse or something unexpected happens and then that can be updated, but that seems like the communication tool. So I'm just not sure the components, the additional pieces.
I agree that I think that there's that it is addressing the problem. The only thing that I think is missing is having the ADA definition. I don't think that there needs to be additional information necessarily. I agree with you on that part.
I have a question. So what is when you're saying the ADA definition, I guess like what's different about that than
there isn't a definition in the law in the budget right now. It says like what you can use to qualify, but there's no definition of disability. So the recommendation is that if we're making this more of a program, just to make sure the definition is included. That's all. The ADA's definition. It's really not, it's a simple request. It doesn't change anything about verification, but it just makes sure that we have there's not a broad understanding of what a disability is. And so that having that available in part of the definitions would be what we were recommending.
Okay.
It also helps with, I think, rules, and that's where I think it will make a difference.
Okay. Sean, I see your hand up. Before we go to you, Miranda, is the administration agreeable to defining disability per the ADA criteria?
I need to have further conversations, but I think right now that it is like a sticking point for us.
That is a what?
Sticking point. It's not something, we had these discussions when it was in-house human services. and so that would be something that we need to continue to discuss internally for me to be able to say like, yes, this is something that we can agree with or not.
Can you share with us the sticking point? Like, can you share with us what that is? Like, yeah, what is I think because, there are some people who know a whole lot about disabilities, and there are some folks who like that is not their wheelhouse necessarily. And so for this group to kind of like create a recommendation, I think it's important to like understand why there is pushback or a sticking point or, whatever for something.
Yeah, I think one, we would want to see the actual language that would be being proposed so that we could have legal look at that. That's the part of like, we have some pieces here, but it's not like the full package and that matters. And I just think my understanding from before is
it's not going to come from this group. That would be like legislative language. These are just recommendations, that that we use the ADA definition. We're not going to be developing legislative language. So in this group, and I know in other task force, the administration has been willing to say yes or no without legislative language. So I'm just wondering if it's a no, then maybe we can take a vote and move on. If there's not issues we can discuss about this, but I think we've talked about this a lot. And so we'd like to hear concrete reasons why you don't want to use this language, so we can consider them. But this whole package, we're not going to ever get to a place where we can see a whole package unless we start moving through these issues. So there's specific reasons why you do not want the ADA language.
Could I just get clarity on what you just said? What is the threshold that you are thinking would be in the final report? Because maybe this got a little confusing when the group did start looking up the last legislative language, like.
Yeah,
because so is the group thinking that there would be recommendations that mirror that language, or is the group thinking it would be something a step back that says the majority of the group recommends expanded eligibility, for example, consider these things? Or is it, because sometimes we're getting very specific, like, oh, we have to wait and get definition from YDP, and then other times like here, it sounds like we're not getting specific. So I think I'm just trying to get.
We tried, that was the only starting point, was to use these. We are not going to be submitting legislative language. So we're using the themes of the bill that exists, because we didn't really have anywhere, we were struggling, I guess, to find that path. So it's not like we're going to present that bill. I guess we're using it as, so yes, we want to talk about eligibility. These are some rules around eligibility or some legislative language. In a report, it's not going to be written like that. We'll touch on, it'll be a narrative, is my thinking. But we need to have these conversations or we're going to get nowhere. We have 2 more meetings after this. And so I am not sure. I mean, I would love to hear why the administration doesn't want to use the ADA definition. What are your, what's giving you pause? But to just say, we need to have more discussion or, discussion in the legislative session is not, it's not helpful in us kind of doing our work.
Someone read the ADA disability definition?
Yeah, we have it.
I just sent it.
Brenda just sent it.
I just sent it to everybody.
Go ahead. I'm happy to read it from what Brenda, from what you sent, and also from what Sarah Lunderville sent. Is
I just copied what Sarah sent.
Okay, it's in the chat, and it's a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a history or record of such impairment, such as cancer that is in remission, or is perceived by others as having such an impairment, such as a person who has scars from a severe burn, etc. So understand it. So I guess, go ahead.
Sorry, Sarah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There was some head shaking. What I wanted to say was that definition of, that is from the ADA's website. That's what Sarah Lunderville sent out today. I just copied and pasted it. And either way, we're saying that then there's the ADA definition, and then the person goes to a medical provider and they decide, the medical provider and them decides if that disability warrants the need. But the definition of disability we cannot argue the ADA's definition of disability. All we're asking is that the ADA's definition be included. If Sarah sent something she did that at the last minute because she didn't have time. So if she sent something that was slightly inaccurate from what you're seeing on the ADA website, she didn't mean to. But the ADA's definition, if there's something that needs to be corrected, someone should connect it.
I was the person, this is Teresa.
Yeah.
My head. Yeah. I'm just like, the such ases are not included in the ADA.
Oh, yeah.
I think those are examples.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, right, but people ask for the definition.
Right.
And so it's just, have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits major life activities, have a record of such impairment, or is as regarded as having such an
Right.
impairment, which is the whole purpose of our medical documentation.
Right. Right, so Teresa is correct, as per usual. And I will, but I was just copying and pasting what Sarah sent, so I apologize for that confusion.
That's okay, I just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure.
Yeah, but that's the idea.
Miranda, can we go to you?
Yeah, happy to. Let's come back. And I think, so this conversation is helpful because what I feel like I'm hearing is it's really you just want a doctor to be able to use this definition as well. Like, so they would still need to provide to ESD the 2-1 GVR. We aren't making a decision that someone is perceived by others as having such an impairment, right? Because that is not something we aren't, as everybody has indicated, economic services doesn't have the medical expertise. And so I think that's part of the concern of like, if that's just the category, then that responsibility has been put on ESD versus like, no, you just want to make sure that it is included on as a reason on the 2-1 GVR that a medical professional could be saying that somebody needs housing because they have a condition as defined as the ADA.
Yeah, that part of it, I think, keeps tripping people up, and I'll just explain, like, as a former housing trust compliance manager and property manager, that line is in there. And what it means, like under HUD, the way they teach you when you're getting certified is if someone comes in a wheelchair and says, I need an accessible unit when they're filling out their application, you can't be like, oh, they're not disabled or make them prove it's like an obvious disability that they have, and we're giving them the space and not making them jump through hoops. So that's just kind of what that means. It's not like you have to look at people. It's in there. It's something that housing providers our affordable housing providers in Vermont have to follow. But we, can or cannot. I know a lot of this stuff is done on the phones these days. But so I just wanted to give some context of like what that section means and how it exists in Vermont already.
And just another piece of context is what in our work at Homelessness Vermont, we work with roughly 400 people who have some form of disability or complex need, but only 112 of them who currently, I think there might be more right now, who need ongoing active support with their voucher renewals and with other service type connections. And so just because they have a disability, they may be qualifying for that type of ongoing support from us, but for this additional layer, we're meeting their need. So I think that's why a medical professional and the patient is the person to come up with that, is because those layers of determination really matter when you're talking to a medical professional.
Miranda, do you feel more comfortable with that?
This conversation's been really helpful. I don't feel that as Julie had said, like could vote and move on right now, but I'm happy to move on because I think the context is helpful for me to be able to go back and have conversations with others.
So how are there other of those, to use your word, sticking points on the eligibility criteria from the administration standpoint?
I have a few more that I can run through. And I think some of this we had already talked about, but maybe hasn't been captured on the spreadsheet as well. Has experienced, it's number 6, has experienced the death of a spouse or domestic partner. And that it has said within the last X number of days, that it isn't what we follow right now. And I think we had, I thought there had been agreement too that we wouldn't want to become more restrictive than we are currently under the rule.
So what is your recommendation? What is the administration's recommendation for that item?
use what is in the budget language right now that we're following. And
Okay.
we can certainly pull that and share if that's helpful.
Okay.
Can we vote?
Go ahead, Miranda.
Sorry. Okay. And the same for number 7, which is experience a natural disaster. What is in there also has like within the X number of days. And so the same recommendation would be to follow what we have in law now, if there is an agreement to that.
Is that, that's all of your sticking points at this time?
So the one last one, I think that we had talked about this as well, but I'm not sure. And I know that we're actually, it said like the note around the domestic violence, dating violence, et cetera. It says that we're waiting for language from steps or the network to provide. But I think one of the important pieces for us to add is like that it caused the household to lose its housing, right? So it's not like there is that connection there, but I don't know. I think that would have to be like, just wanted to highlight that, but that might be something that steps or the other providers, the network share anyway, because I don't think I haven't seen that has come.
So so under the domestic violence piece, your recommendation for that number 9 is to add that has caused a household to lose housing?
Yeah.
Is that what it currently says?
Yeah.
Okay. We do have plans to this morning to talk about the domestic violence piece. The reason that it was on the agenda was because it was, flagged last time that that we were looking for some more specific guidance on how to handle a household or one member of the household who experiences domestic violence while within the program, and how to proceed with that going forward. So we're waiting on language from the Vermont network more specific to that. Frank, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag. So I captured those in the spreadsheet that I can recirculate. And then I just had one question from Miranda. So in terms of like showing that the domestic violence or violence was the cause of household, like how is that done in a way? Like how do you actually define what caused the homelessness?
Yeah, I'm gonna invite Nicole to respond to that because I think she'll be able to clear that up.
Hi, thank you. So I think the best thing for me to do is give an example in terms of the death of a spouse or minor child. It would be, why did they lose their, so if there is a situation where a spouse passes away and the person that survives can no longer afford the housing that they're in, and so they lose their housing because of that, that would be the cause of housing related to that. So that is the piece that we're looking at. Domestic violence, it would be if someone's fleeing and they have to leave where they were housed because of the domestic violence. In terms of that. Does that answer your question, Frank?
Yes. Yeah, I think I guess on the former one too, I just have a bunch of, I guess I just have concerns, and I can talk with some other folks about this around, like if it has to be the primary cause or secondary cause, and like how you actually like, how that's actually done in practice. It seems like it's something difficult to do to prove like the causal there in every case.
I think, can I just put a pause? Because I'm just back again to Jubilee, what you said earlier of like, what is the objective at this point? Because I think like, if at this point, the group's objective is we're making high level recommendations such as, I'm just giving hypothetical recommendations like, no, don't change eligibility, or yes, expand eligibility. Here are a few populations to consider. Like that's one type of recommendation. And if that's what we're recommending, then some of this seems like we don't need to talk about it because we're not actually writing the legislative examples. Or do you want the legislative examples? Because then I think we do have to have the ADA language. We have to answer these questions. So I think that would be helpful to know, like, what level of recommendation the group feels at this point it would be
It's
making.
going to depend on the topic. We are a group of experts, and a lot of us have a lot of experience and expertise in different areas, and not all of those areas are covered. But I think this is one area where there is a lot of expertise, and there's a lot of recent experience on what happens when we don't get this right.
So then I
And
think,
so I think it'll be a mixture.
well, then I think, I think for us to speak at the state, that's hard for us to go back and forth, because then we're translating things into rules. And then I think that is why then Miranda was asking for the specifics for ADA. So I think then if we're gonna give specifics,
Well, there's a difference between specifics and actually writing, like being ledge counsel and writing language, which is.
but I think that's sort of what, in some ways, the discussion here is asking about, is some of these specific
I
words.
don't necessarily know that it's how it's worded so much as like including day limits. Like that's not necessarily, for me, that's about like how the population's impacted. For example, somebody who loses their child, if the day limit is 30 days, I'm not going to agree with that. And there's a reason behind that. And so it's not like, that's pretty like a focused recommendation, but it needs to be talked about in this room.
Yeah, I was just saying, as we go through these categories, I was not clear, because some seems to be more specific than others. So again, just, I think it's helpful to know, like, what is our end date where we feel like things are good enough? And maybe it seems like if we have specific language, we have. If we don't, we don't. But again, for this specific category, not talking about the limits, but just even for like the eligible categories, like what is the goal of how specific do we want to get?
Brenda has her hand up.
I just want to say that we've been keeping our recommendations super high level. I tend to get lost myself in legislative language and rules and all of the specifics. And I have taken the change seriously and the advice seriously, that we really need to keep it high level in order to get through this. And so each of the recommendations that we wrote was not in language form, but in like the high level, this is what we should be doing. I also get nervous around that cause your loss of housing for domestic violence and for some other things. And I think that that's something that might have to get worked out in the legislative session, because I have seen some things play out and also had my own personal lived experience with domestic violence that makes me nervous about how that can be interpreted. So I think that those are things that if we get really weedy, we're going to have a really big problem. But if we say, like, we want to make sure that people in the GA program who experience domestic violence are somehow included in this as a high level recommendation, I think that to me is what we should be sending to the legislature.
Yeah.
Is that, I was spoken to about my problem with getting into the weeds. So I'm working on it.
Yeah, that just helps people understand when is it sort of good enough to then move on versus are we wanting to make sure every word is, that's all.
I think if I could just jump in, I think, Lily and Miranda, both of you, work for the administration and are here. And I am so grateful, Lily, Miranda, for you weighing in today, because we really haven't heard recommendations from the administration. I think that so much of this has felt, from my perspective anyway, that, we're kind of presenting things and then like gauging a response that's hard to kind of guess. And so I think I'm curious if there are other recommendations that you have, like, you're part of this committee. So when I hear questions like, well, what does the committee want? Or like, what is this, like, what do you want? Like, I would love for you to be like part of that conversation instead of sort of outside of it. Because I think that while there are experts in the room who know a lot about domestic violence or know a lot about disabilities or know a lot about Section 8 or a lot about youth or, housing, for example, like, you all are administering this program. And I think it's also ideal for you to like be part of the discussion as we move forward instead of just responding to an end package, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, Sarah, what's challenging, and to be honest, what's going to be challenging in these next few sessions is like, we've brought up a few times, like things like budgetary implications. And I think the sense that we've gotten from the group is that there's not really an appetite to like talk about that. And I understand philosophically why that is. And I respect the opinions of people who have shared that and their values. And I think we just are coming from an administrative perspective where we have to operate within a budget. And so I think for some of these, and to be honest, like with expanding eligibility, unless the conversation is going to include, yeah, we want to see the cost implications, we want to see the budget, we want to maybe make other choices here, I don't know that we would be able to vote for or against something and might have to abstain. And so, you know, again, I think in some ways that's just sort of the how the conversation has unfolded and so how many people have approached this conversation, which again, I respect the reasons for that and why people feel motivated to do so. But I think that just that dynamic puts us then, I think, in a limited position with how we can respond. And so that's just something I would share.
I understand that perspective, Lily, for sure. And I'm certainly someone who also thinks about things from a budget perspective. So that resonates with me. However, I think that what the purpose of this task force is, and, you know, I don't think we need to spend a great deal amount of time because we may just need to agree to disagree, and that's okay. But I'm not seeing in the directives of this task force to address or discuss those budgetary implications. So I think I do understand that perspective, but I want to say that I think that that's probably likely one of the reasons that that's not, you know, come up or been a primary driver of discussion, is because that is not captured within the directives that were given to this task force. So that may be the kind of friction that we're feeling.
Thanks, Sarah. I think, you know what, I agree with what Liz said, and like we're used to friction and we can work through that. I think, you know, it's for us, it's finding like where do we feel comfortable to be able to like share our thoughts, and then there's going to be other parts where for us it's going to be like, no, we see far too many budgetary implications that we're not having that conversation, and that's where like I feel like I'm frustrating people because I keep saying like the whole package, so I won't say that anymore. I'll just say like there's budgetary implications here of which I would need to dive into further, but just understanding like that the others want to just talk about other things, and that's maybe just knowing like that's where I'm going to be stuck, is because I see here's this implication, or I see like we have a limited number of motel rooms, and at the end of the day, economic services is going to have to figure out how do we manage that, and so that's fine. And I think that was mostly what I had. The only other thing, but I think we said we were going to talk about it because I think is also what Brenda was mentioning, that she had put forward recommendations, right? Clearly, the administration is going to have thoughts on removing day limits and caps, et cetera. So once we get there, I can weigh in on that.
Okay. So looking at, I'm just wanting to be mindful of our time here too. We had tentatively proposed a vote, which can just sort of be a gut check vote too, around eligibility. And I would like to know what is outstanding still for this group before we can kind of move forward with a vote. So keeping in mind that we are looking for some language around the domestic violence protections for households that experience domestic violence while in the program. Keeping in mind that it sounds like the recommendation from Brenda on behalf of VCIL is to include the ADA definition or refer to that in here. So has a disability that falls, within the definition of the ADA and can be documented by. And to also include the YDP youth criteria in here. Aside from domestic violence, ADA, youth piece that we're waiting on, what more do we need to be able to take a vote on eligibility criteria?
Shelby has her hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to suggest or motion that we go through each eligibility criteria and vote to arrive at a final group of eligibility requirements. So voting on each eligibility criteria to start.
Is there other discussion on how folks think we should approach this sort of voting or determining agreement on these items? Or do folks support Shelby's suggestion of going through?
This is Julie. I mean, that's fine with me. I think that's a path towards progress. So, yeah.
Okay.
What are the next steps after the vote? This is Lily. Like, who's writing the report? Are there opportunities for those who either abstain or disagree to weigh in on the report? Like, what is the process, just so that there's like transparency about that as people make their decisions?
What would you like that to be? I would say, what's your suggestion, Lily? You have great questions, and I don't know if we have all the answers. So what are your thoughts?
I'm just going to jump in, sorry, Jubilee, and just say at the start of all of this, we did vote and agree that we would have kind of like a majority, kind of minority opinion and provide folks who, I guess, abstained or didn't agree to write something to include in the report if they wanted. So, and then out of those who do agree, I think Sarah and I will work on some of it and may assign other parts out to people, or if people have interest in writing on a certain section or drafting. And then I think we'll use kind of our final time to look at that all collectively.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think that makes sense to have a collaborative writing process and to make sure everyone can see it and make sure that their opinion is clearly stated. And so thank you for clarifying that that would be the process.
Okay, so moving through these recommendations, the first one is under household eligibility is 60 years of age or older. Can folks raise their hand or say yes if they agree with that? I can't see in the room, so.
Do we want to just go around person by person? So we capture.
Sure. Yeah, we can,
let's
do a well, we can do that, or we can do sort of a roll call vote too. Yeah. I'll just go through the list on the website. The first is Miranda Gray.
Sarah, actually, before we go around, can you just make really clear what the question is that we're weighing in on?
Sure.
I'll preface that we'll likely abstain just because a lot of these policies are outside of our bailiwick, but it would be really helpful to know what the actual question is. Thank you.
Yep. So the question is do you approve of the following household eligibility for the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program? And the first item that we are looking at specifically is 60 years of age or older. So to be eligible for the program, established in household must not have adequate nighttime residence or have a member within their household who meets one of the following criteria. The first one is 60 years of age or older. So going down the list of members, Miranda.
Abstain.
Lily.
Abstain.
Elizabeth Gilman.
Agree.
Molly is not here and we don't have a representative from the Long-Term Care Coalition. Brenda Siegel.
Agree.
Frank popped off. Amy.
Agree.
Jubilee.
Agree.
Myself, I agree. Sean.
We'll have to abstain.
Do we, I think Elise, you were here from VHCB, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And we'll also have to abstain.
Shelby?
Agree.
And I don't think I saw Christopher Loris here. Is he not here?
He's,
No.
yeah, he's with helping a family member right now with something.
Okay, okay. So can, Jubilee, can you give us a report out of the, agreement or abstentions?
Yes, we have 6 agreements, 4 abstentions, and 2 absent. Or 3, yeah. I might have miscalculated. How many do we have? I think I forgot. We have 3 absents. I forgot to mark Frank down.
Is Frank, can we keep it open for Frank? Because he's probably popping back on soon. No?
We'd have to, I think, allow everyone to kind of weigh in, which is fine with me if we want to do that, the 3 absent
I
folks.
think we're okay.
But,
I don't want to make it take longer.
Okay, next, number 2, is, a disability, and we are recommending to add in, under the ADA definition. So again, I'll go down the list. Miranda,
Abstain.
Lily,
Abstain.
Elizabeth,
Agree.
Brenda,
Agree.
Amy,
agree.
Jubilee,
Agree.
I agree. As Sarah Russell, Sean,
Will abstain.
VHCB,
Abstain.
Elise, okay, Shelby,
Agree.
okay. And I'm assuming that's again 6 agree, 4 abstain, and 3 absent.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is experiencing a serious short-term medical condition or has been discharged from a healthcare facility where the individual was being treated for a serious short-term medical condition within the last 30 days. We also talked about, actually a piece before we do the roll call, is including in here discharged from a healthcare facility or a substance use residential treatment program. But I'm not seeing that in our spreadsheet. How do folks feel about making that change?
Can Brenda has?
Can we, we just, in the discussion on disability that I briefly had with Sarah Lunderville this morning, she just named that the definition of disability includes short-term, you can have a short-term disability that's caused by a short-term medical condition, and that's covered in the 201 GVR. So I just wanted to name that as we're considering it.
So is your suggestion that we don't actually need this specific criteria
That is my suggestion.
I would look to Miranda or I guess Miranda or Nicole. Does that make sense to you to remove this specific criteria because it is included in the ADA?
I would say yes.
Okay. Moving on then, number 4 under eligibility criteria is a child under 19 years of age, or is a child 19 years of age or under. Going down the list, Miranda,
Abstain.
Lily,
Abstain.
Elizabeth,
Agree.
Brenda,
Agree.
Frank, you're back on.
Agree.
Amy,
Agree.
Jubilee,
Agree.
Sarah Russell, I agree. Sean,
I'll abstain on behalf of the administration.
VHCB,
Abstain.
Shelby.
Agree.
All right. So we had 7 agrees that time, 4 abstentions, and 3 absent.
Well, 2 absent now.
2 absent now. Number 5 is a person who is pregnant. Going down the members, Miranda,
Agree.
Lily,
Agree.
Elizabeth,
Agree.
Brenda,
Agree.
Frank,
Agree.
is that a question or you really do agree?
Everyone keep coughs. I'm trying to stay on mute as much as.
Okay. Okay, Frank. Pregnant people, thank you everywhere. Amy
Agree.
Johnson,
Agree.
Jubilee,
Agree.
Sarah Russell, agree. Sean,
Agree.
Elise,
I'm gonna have to abstain again.
Shelby.
Agree.
So we had 8 agrees, 2 abstention, and 2 absent on that one.
No, I thought
There was only one abstention.
the only one abstention.
1 abstention.
Yeah. 10 agrees and 2 absent.
Great. Next, has experienced the death of a spouse or domestic partner, has experienced the death of a domestic partner or a minor child that caused their homelessness. Miranda,
So to be clear, we're just saying it would remain what is in law now.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
I'm
think
also
that's-
right, like,
I believe so.
Yeah. Remove the suggestion of X days and stick with what's in the budget language.
Yes.
okay, thank you. Then agree.
Lily,
Agree.
Elizabeth,
Agree.
Brenda,
Agree.
Frank,
Agree.
Amy,
Agree.
Jubilee,
Agree.
Sarah Russell, I agree. Sean,
Agree.
Elise,
Abstain.
Shelby,
Agree.
right. So we had 10 agrees, 1 abstention and 2 absent, right? Next, has experienced a natural disaster such as flood, fire, or hurricane that caused the household to lose its housing. So that is the current criteria, correct? Yes. So Miranda,
Agree.
Lily,
Agree.
Elizabeth,
Agree.
Brenda,
Agree.
Frank,
Agree?
Amy,
Agree.
Jubilee,
Agree.
Sarah Russell, I agree. Sean,
Agree.
Elise,
Abstain.
and Shelby.
Agree.
Great. Again, with 10 agrees, 1 abstain, and 2 absent. Next is under a court-ordered eviction or constructive eviction due to circumstances over which the household has no control. Miranda,
Agree.
Lily,
Agree.
Elizabeth,
Agree.
Brenda,
Agree.
Frank,
Agree?
Amy,
Agree.
Jubilee.
Agree.
This is Sarah Russell, I agree. Sean,
Strongly agree.
Elise,
Abstain.
Shelby.
Agree.
Again, with 10 agrees, 1 abstain, and 2 absent. The last piece here under household eligibility recommendations is a household experiencing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual violence, stalking, human trafficking, hate violence, or other dangerous or life-threatening conditions that related to violence against the individual or a household member, which caused the household to lose their housing. I want to put a caveat in here that I would like to, we can do a gut check vote, but I would like to get some specific language from the Vermont Network around protecting the around protections in place for households that experience domestic violence while within the program as well. But we can do a
And that can be an additional.
Okay. Okay. Miranda,
I'm going to abstain until I see the additional piece. Thank you.
Lily,
Abstain.
Elizabeth,
Agree.
Brenda,
I'm going to abstain until I see the additional language.
Well, I think we're just voting on this section. The piece from will be a different section. So it'll be, this is kind of the thing that already exists. And then we will add an additional recommendation that is around domestic violence when it occurs in the hotel room.
Yeah, I thought they were also going to provide some language around that cause the loss of housing. That part, is that correct, Frank?
Yeah, that's that was in the other parts too, around domestic, around death and then around natural disaster. So I think.
No. Right, I know. I didn't know if they were providing language around that as well. Is that not, am I not understanding?
So I think it was just keeping it status quo there.
Okay.
So maybe
Wait, I'm confused.
So why don't
maybe
we
we
vote?
just
Why don't we vote on this number 9 recommendation around domestic violence and then incorporate protections for households that experience domestic violence within the program once we get that language from the Vermont Network? Does that sound like an okay way to proceed?
Is it possible to vote on this part after we get the language so we can put it all together? There's parts of this that have operated in strange ways, and maybe they have language that will correct some of that. So we might want to adjust it. Yeah.
Are folks comfortable on pausing on this last piece of eligibility until we have more information?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, that was
We didn't have a
painless,
youth
everybody.
What about the youth one?
What about the youth?
The youth one?
Oh, yes, you're
YDP.
correct. Yes. So a recommendation that has been proposed to be added to household eligibility criteria is to include youth from the YDP program ages 20 to 24. So going down the list here, Miranda,
Abstain.
Lily,
Abstain.
Elizabeth,
Sarah, could you please define YDP for me?
the youth demonstration project. So it's youth transitioning from foster care
It's a youth development program.
or development or
Same,
demonstration.
same definition.
Sarah, could I ask you to repeat the language again?
Sure. So we are proposing a a recommendation has been proposed to add youth between the transition age youth between the ages of 20 up to 24 under the youth development program.
Thank you. I'm going to vote yes.
Okay. Brenda,
Agree.
Frank,
Yes.
Amy,
Agree.
Jubilee.
Yes.
This is Sarah Russell. I vote yes. Sean,
Abstain.
Elise,
Abstain.
Shelby.
Agree.
Okay. So again, we had on that one 7 agree, 4 abstain, and 2 absent, right? Did I capture that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's all take a deep breath.
Do we want to take like a quick
I
5-minute
was
break?
thinking it would be good to take a break. And when we come back, we can move into program requirements as the next piece of our agenda. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, we will plan to reconvene at 12:37. Thanks, everybody. Hey, folks in the room, is everyone starting to get settled? Oh, you're all on mute. I have no idea if anyone's talking to me, and you're like that big on my screen, so.
There we go. We can hear you, sorry. Folks are just coming back.
It's closer, you want it to stay open.
Yeah, but every now and then people come on tours and things. You're so conscious about people. We are all back. I think Brenda is the only one who's missing, and she said she'd be right back.
All right, should we give it a minute or should we jump in?
Maybe we'll just give one more minute and then we can get started.
Okay.
Regardless.
I'm curious, are there a lot of student groups going through the State House right now?
Today is not too as busy. Sometimes there are, sometimes they're not. I saw some groups this morning, but no students groups this time. That's all today. I like the seeing the student groups. And Brenda's back.
All right. So next on the agenda of easy conversations today are program requirements. We wanted to highlight, I guess I just want to say as level setting, I know these are difficult conversations and decisions, and that everyone is representing, different stakeholders or, different organizations or the administration or, a municipality or a specific subpopulation. And I really do appreciate how challenging some of these conversations can be, and that everyone, I want to make sure that everyone feels like they're included and part of this discussion. So if you're ever not feeling that way, let me know or let Jubilee know, because it's participation from everyone is super important to us. So wanted to start by saying that to start off with. For under program requirements, we have, it just got very loud in my office here. Hang on just one second. That was me yelling to all 20 people. Thank God for open office environments here.
That Sarah, that had very elementary school teacher vibes. Like, everybody look at me.
I was just gonna say a swear word and realized that we were on record here. So, okay, we have flagged program requirement, or flag the following items for program requirements to spend some extra care discussing today. One of them is around income contribution, and the other is around requirements or engagement within services, which or coordinated entry, which is one of the I feel like the two places where we've had the most discussion around and maybe not landed necessarily in agreement. So we wanted to focus conversation on those. So starting off with income contribution, currently within the program, there is a 30% income contribution that equates to a certain number of self-pay days each month for households. And I know, Brenda, I think that you sent something. I had what felt like 8 meetings before I even came into this one today, and I have like 7 emails in my inbox from you. So maybe you can kind of kick us off, or if you're, can you, you're not on, so you can't share your screen. If you can tell me which what you will be sort of referring to, then I can share my screen with the
Well,
group.
if we're talking about income contribution, this is our amended income contribution recommendation.
Okay, let me open that up 1 second, and then I can share it with I can share my screen here so that we're all looking at the same thing while you're. That is not it.
It's attached.
Okay, hang on. Okay, here we go. Is this it? Amended income contribution recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, and this is under charge 7. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is a recommendation from Shelby LeBaron, Amy Johnson, and myself. And this, it represents a discussion. We met with my Section 8 caseworker and multiple Section 8 caseworkers to ask how they do it. After our recommendation, there was a lot of questions about it. And so then we kind of filtered through what would be the best way with people who had done income contributions before. So just so you know how we arrived here. And then asked other Section 8 caseworkers their preferences among those decisions. So we have a recommendation that is 2 parts. It has 2 choices. One is either to have no recommendation or one is 2. So I'm going to go through both. And our recommendation is that we give both to the legislature so that they can decide. So one is there should be no income contribution due to the majority of people who are in the program having significantly low incomes. The income contribution is difficult to manage and prevents available resources for housing. The income contribution additionally disincentivizes income. It is managed in a complicated way and significant in proportion to the household's income, but insignificant in proportion to what we're saving, we assume. And we're also, I just want to pause there and say that we heard from several housing case managers at housing authorities that the income contribution is prohibitive to when they're trying to get people into housing because it is using people's resources even in that last minute right before they're housed. Instead, we recommend an income savings contribution that will be matched when the household has found transitional or permanent housing. Households have the option to set up their own savings or escrow account with the navigational supportive providers when needed. Households will show that they are adding up to 30% of their income to said account by providing documentation at each renewal as they do currently with their proof of income. The amount saved will be documented in their case notes. The amount saved up to 30% of their income will be matched at the time of moving into permanent or transitional housing. This will incentivize savings without creating a requirement that can have catastrophic outcomes. It encourages individual participation in their next steps in an empowering way that also lessens the burden when they are suddenly in the position of having to pay a lot of upfront costs of new household items, internet, phone, etc. We wanted to stress that income contribution is not preferred model, and we have heard from several housing case managers, as I said before, that the hotel income contributions are significantly disruptive to the process of achieving and being successful in permanent housing. I wanted to say that in my housing case manager, in Bradwell, they have an exception from some of the HUD requirements. And so they have done income match programs or income savings programs. And I asked them how they do it, how they manage that. And they manage it by allowing people to set up their own savings account and just show that they are adding to the savings account or escrow account. So that seemed like the simplest option because it did seem too complicated to do something different at this in the legislative. Do you want me to finish or do you want me to answer?
I just had a question about that.
Will you hold it till I?
Yes.
Okay, so the second part 2 of our recommendation is if the legislature chooses to use an income contribution, we recommend if there is a required income contribution, it should still follow the above model of savings rather than being paid into hotel or motel owners. Rather than using the HUD calculation for contribution, which we understand to be too complicated for this program, should create some standardized deductions and standardized income calculations, keeping up with the spirit of the HUD model. Obviously, these suggestions are flexible, but these were the ones that the Section 8 case manager came up with for the adjustments. Disability of any kind is $480 a year. That's standard HUD. Experience of homelessness is a $1,200 a year adjustment per year ongoing. Medicaid or Medicare is $500 per year, and transportation is $1,200 per year. That should include that covers insurance is what they're thinking, and other types of public transportation. If there's a new job, individuals will show their income after 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days to create an average. After such time, unless income changes, that calculation shall be used to determine income contribution. In an ongoing job, the 12-month average can be used. Again, at any time, households or individuals can report a decrease in income, and an increase of more than 10% would be required to be reported. At no time shall participants be required to renew for purposes of proof of income more often than participants without income are required. And accommodations need to be made to ensure that renewals don't disrupt participant jobs. I know that's a little more detailed than some of our other recommendations. The reason being that the high level recommendation was too confusing, had too many loose ends. So this was what we came up with. I think it still leaves a lot of room for the legislature to make decisions. Does anybody else who came up with these with me have anything to add? Shelby? Okay. I also can, yeah. So now, Lily, do you have a question?
Yeah, did they say anything about people having a hard time opening accounts with banks? Because I've heard that, so I'm just wanted to.
No, I know that some people do have a hard time. It tends to be our clients who have a not regular income, but they have like a smaller amount of money or savings that are struggling with that, not the ones who have the income to save for this escrow account. But I think that we'd have to work with providers, or something the legislature would have to work out, as if providers can help those clients that are in those situations, or potentially there may be some other options that I know are also being explored by Legal Aid and others.
I see Nicole's hand up.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to kind of put out there something that should be considered as you're thinking about the income contribution threshold, and that is the fact that this program does not currently have any kind of FPL limit or income threshold to be eligible for the program. So I know that as we're having the conversations about potentially removing any kind of income contribution, and in conjunction also talking about resource limits, you could in essence be opening the program up to anybody. Period. And so I think that as you're thinking through this, you may want to consider what an FPL level might look like. I can tell you that just looking at some quick data, we have over 150 households that within their 80 days had 20 plus days of self-pay because of their income. So it's just something I wanted to make sure people were thinking about, that as we're talking about removing different levels, some lever is going to get pulled somewhere to ensure that we're housing who we want to house.
Nicole, can you just define FPL for this group?
Sorry, yes. Most of our public benefit programs look at federal poverty limits.
Thank you.
Most common is 185% of FPL to be eligible for the Three Squares Vermont program and LIHEAP. I'm like, what's the other program? The fuel program.
Thanks, Nicole. Sean, I saw your hand up and then down.
Just wanted to get that acronym defined, so thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So I would say that the housing limits for income are much different than limits for other poverty programs. And I would say the other poverty programs also have some of them are federal, but they have some real, they leave some people hungry and people with other challenges. I think we have seen that we don't want to leave people unhoused. So part of our recommendation is definitely not creating an income limit. It is specific to how we manage income contributions. And yeah, I think the legislature can look at and say, if someone has above this amount, then they will additionally self-pay, or they can self-pay a portion. Or I think there is some flexibility there on what that's why we tried to leave flexibility in what we were coming up with. 20 men on an angle right now or something out there. If you are hearing the construction in the room, you're really missing out. So I don't know if other people have questions about that recommendation. Again, it's a little more wordy than our other ones, but that's because it seemed like when we made the higher level one, we needed some more specifics.
I personally need some time to read this and think about it. I don't know about others, but I appreciate having these kind of things. I want to sit with it, which is hard to do in front of a camera. But I'd love to hear other people's initial thoughts as well.
I think it makes sense to be thinking about it a little bit and to see if there's ways that we could, this came out of our research, but there might be other.
I also wonder if we could put forth a recommendation that is around this, reconsider new way, income contribution that kind of includes both of these, or maybe your higher level one, all of it, and it's just saying these are some of the possibilities, but that if folks aren't happy with the current process, these are some alternatives that we believe the legislature should look into.
I think, and you two can tell me if I'm wrong, both Shelby and Amy, but I think that we would be amenable to it being presented. That's sort of how we were thinking these two options as here are some alternative options to the way that we do income contribution right now. The recommendation being, am I correct that we would be open to that? Yeah, okay.
As I think that it's important for us to take some time to sort of digest this recommendation as well. It's because there's a lot here. I think and this isn't a criticism by any means. I feel like this feels very overwhelming to me, and really complex. So I'm curious how around feedback from the administration around just administration of of this. So that's my first thought. I guess my second is that to Lily's point around being able to set up your own bank account. I'm also curious how if folks are having wages, if there's garnishing of wages due to how that would impact this. And I'm curious if there's a way for the administration to be able to hold maybe more responsibility around developing that escrow opposed to having it on the clients to do that. As sort of we've seen that as a successful model with the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, through HUD. So I guess I'm not pro or con any of this. Those are just some of the initial reactions I have as I read through this.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything like this, whether it's for the state to administer or if it's going to be for community partners, it would definitely need to come associated with some administrative funds and capacity, because it is very challenging and it is very, you need to make sure you have the right kind of people and the right structure when you're dealing with people's money. And it's a pretty intensive relationship with the individual and with the banking institution. So I think that anything like that needs to then just, again, have the associated administrative support, whether that's positions for the administration or positions for the agencies. And so that would need to be factored in to the cost. I think, you know, not necessarily sharing like an opinion, but I think this is where just to consider in terms of operations, is something like this a direction versus something that's a little bit more straightforward? Like there is going to be just an, you know, no income contribution, but there's an income limit, or no, you know, those things. Again, I think in the moment when people are applying, that's a choice that people can consider. It's like, do we want shorter intakes, quicker decisions, or do we want more of a process, more of a program? So I think those are just some factors to consider, because all of this, you know, the downside of it is that it's going to add to the intake. It's going to add to the cost of having more folks. A different way to do it is, again, have just nothing required, but have some sort of threshold. So it's, again, a quicker black and white decision. I think there are pros and cons to each.
Is that Shelby? I think I
Yeah, I was just going to say Shelby's had her hand up.
Yeah, maybe it would also be possible, like, I know it really empowers people, especially when going through homelessness, no matter what amount of money you're making or how, to be able to set up an account yourself and kind of be in control of that. So maybe a recommendation that in the case that they cannot set up an account successfully for themselves, that then the state or a different agency can help them set up that account and kind of have more control over it until they can successfully take over that account themselves.
And just to answer your question, I like that idea, Shelby. And just to answer your question, Sarah, or that it seems overwhelming. I think what we're actually proposing is simpler than the words we put, but I wanted to make sure to describe it or explain it. And so that felt like a lot in the way that it was described. And so for that, I apologize. And also that you are just hearing it now, which I did try with all of my might to get it earlier, but it did not happen because we've been too overwhelmed. So I apologize for that as well.
Yeah, I totally get it. I'm wondering about something that's, or is this group landing on some form of income contribution? I wonder if where we can find agreement in this. So it sounds like in either plan, there is that you've proposed, or either recommendation that you've proposed, there is that the household will be responsible for a contribution of some kind, whether that is toward, self-pay days, or whether that is to contribute to a savings account of some kind. Actually, no, you said in the first one, it's optional, right?
Right. Yeah, no, the option one would be that's an option you have. That is how my Section 8 case manager, or how Brattleboro Housing Authority has managed it. And that was very, very empowering, because then it was empowering to make more money. It was empowering to save money. So that was sort of where I came up with, was how do we incentivize instead of making it a requirement. And option two is the legislature and administration together feel that there has to be some kind of requirement there. And so maybe instead we do it this way. So we put both options out there so that there was some flexibility.
So how would their income be, like, you're proposing that their income would be matched up to 30% of their income would be matched at the time of, how does that work?
Well, the other programs that do matching programs are like they save the amount, and then it's probably matched up to an amount total. But it would be, the legislature would have to budget for that. The administration would have to. And the idea would be hoping to keep them out of poverty longer. Obviously, you understand the idea, Sarah, but so that would, I think, would be something that it would have to be in the budget, that there's a match, that there's money for match. And I think that Just to also name that right now, people prove their income on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis constantly. And so there already is a high administrative burden there. And so we're just changing what they're proving is that they have saved, that this is their income and they have saved this much income. And then the legislature decides on what they're able to do or willing to do for a match with the administration. And all of us running around arguing with them. I hope that answered your question. I think there's things that have to be worked out, but keeping it as high level as we could. We kept the structure, the outline, but not so I think that Julie's right, that these are some different ways you could do it. And we name these two. And if there's other recommendations too, then we name those as well.
Go ahead, Miranda.
I would just add that I feel like if we're going to be full disclosure, right, if people aren't paying for the rooms, there's an additional budget cost to the state. So it would be setting money aside potentially for that match savings, and there would have to be more money for more rooms because you would have those folks that would have been paying for their nights would no longer be paying for their nights.
Miranda or Nicole, I'm wondering, if you, obviously not today, but I'm wondering if you could provide us with a sense of how the income contributions offset the cost of the program. Like, what does that look like? Sort of like the average length of self-pay days. I mean, Nicole, you just mentioned that somebody has 20 self-pay days, or if there's a way for you to sort of help us to understand the implications of making changes to the income contribution, that would be helpful.
I can do that, and I can speak a little more formally. I was just running some numbers as you were talking, and I can tell you since the beginning of July, we've had about 12,000 self-pay days that we know about. There are households that self-pay without telling us, and then they come back and like, oh, I just have my paycheck, and because they know there is this rhythm and routine that has happened. So to this point, it's been about $1 million that has been self-paid since the first of the fiscal year.
Since July 1st.
Is it possible?
Yes.
Is it possible to get that exact number? Because that does seem like a place where that would be really helpful in the budget. Because it seems like something, yeah.
Yes, we can do that.
I'm also wondering if there's a compromise between, that income contribution where, of the 30% that folks are, sort of required to pay in, if, 15% goes toward, program offset as it does now, and then 15% goes to, or, half of it goes to that, and then the other half of it goes to some kind of an escrow account as well, if there's a way to kind of create a hybrid, compromise. I do think that in my experience, in low-income housing and with the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, is that escrow can be really helpful for folks and ideal. And I think especially for, moving into permanent housing, I also wonder if stand up of that escrow over time can help a household to pay for a security deposit, which may alleviate some of the stress on the HOP financial assistance, and potentially be able to free up additional HOP funds to support back rent so that people are staying in housing, so if folks are able to contribute toward their, entry into permanent housing in some way, then it may potentially create that cost savings on the other end too. So those are just some of the thoughts that I'm having as well.
Building on that, I'm also wondering if we look at how frequently we're recertifying someone's income. I know we just talked about, the costs of the administration of the program, which are a very real thing, is looking how much is being spent on that. What if we recertify people monthly or every 3 months their income and use an average? What if we can reduce the costs of administering the program as well for a net benefit for the state's budget.
And also the recurring homelessness that occurs when you don't have anything, when you enter into your permanent housing. So the idea is this escrow helps put people in a more stable place so that they don't fall off right away. And that we definitely spend a significant amount of money with people who fall back into homelessness. And so figuring any ways that we can lift people out of poverty, I think is also reduces administrative costs and overall program costs in general.
Yeah, I mean, I would add too, with regard to the HOP financial assistance, I know each community sort of administers those pots of funding a little bit differently. In Chittenden County, the rules for our program specifically are that if a household can't access HOP funding twice within the same 12-month period. I don't know, Lily, if that's consistent with other regions as well, but so if a household utilizes HOP funds for a security deposit, then they are likely not eligible to access HOP funds for back rent should they fall behind in rent within the following 12-month period as well. So having a household be able to utilize their own escrow funding, or escrowed funds for a security deposit would enable them to potentially still be eligible for back rent assistance should they need it within the first 12 months of moving into permanent housing, which feels like a plus to me. Other thoughts that folks have on income contribution? Miranda, go ahead.
I don't know if it's necessarily the income contribution piece, or I just wanted to reflect on Jubilee's thoughts about could we do longer vouchers. And I guess I feel like I just need to add in the nuance of, which kind of ties in with the public comment period of like, we have a number of hotels who will only allow an authorization for 24 hours because for very valid reasons. And for some, maybe not so much. But so some of that isn't something that the state can necessarily control. And then, sorry, I just lost my other thought. I should have written that down. But there's just some factors that we don't necessarily have all that control in. And I know that, there's the like, well, then maybe you could add more controls in there. That also comes with an expense and more administrative burden. And I did think of, and I lost it again. Sorry, I'll raise my hand again when I think the second point that I wanted to make sure that I shared.
I'll just respond to that. There's absolutely things the administration and the way we minister programs can't change, but I think that's why we focus on the things we can. So even though the hotel may require a renewal every 24 hours, we don't need to go through that step of recertifying their income every paycheck. I think we can set up there are some things we can change, but where we can, we should be doing those things to reduce administrative tasks and therefore administrative costs.
Can we shift from income contribution to engagement under the same section of program requirements?
Yeah. I think just like thinking bigger picture, I think we had a good conversation. Do we want to kind of table this discussion until next time around the income contribution, just until next time, so folks have more time to read through Brenda's and Shelby and Amy's recommendation and kind of let that sink in and talk with their folks and kind of pick that back up next time? Yes.
Okay. I guess everybody's okay with that. All right. Moving into engagement with services under program requirements. We have had which area is this under program? What number is this program requirements?
It's charge. Uh,
All of these look the same to me now. Oh, five. Is it 5?
Oh, no, I think it's under charge 1, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh, participant requirements.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Got it.
all, there's kind of subsections of that
Yes.
one. That one's the big one.
Yes, you're right. Okay, so some of the things that we have talked about are removing the resource tests, so removing the savings requirement for folks. We have discussed self-pay and savings and income contribution. But I'm also curious about how we want to include requirements for ongoing eligibility related to engagement with services or related to coordinated entry enrollment.
Our recommendations last time were to stick with the budget language on that. You know that we fundamentally don't believe in required services. However, the budget language, I think, addressed the need for some non-traditional or non-categorical case management, I think is what you taught me the other day, Sarah, I can't remember. And so I think that language actually addressed it, and we added to that responsibilities of that review, but the review is really the responsibility of the providers.
I'm not sure I'm following.
So in program requirements, the budget language, which I don't have right in front of me and can't see it right now, but there's it already says how case management would be handled, and I think that while is not perfect in what we fundamentally believe, I think it does address the need while still it's a good compromise between the different positions, the budget language currently on that.
So just leave it as
the budget, yeah. And then I think the other pieces are not really requirements on the participants, so that doesn't make sense here. The other pieces of what we recommended, I don't think. Trying to find it, but.
So this, oh, sorry.
So, yeah, no, I think that, I didn't think of the resource test as in that, I think of it more fitting into eligibility, actually. So I wouldn't put that in participant requirements.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody else has the budget language they can put up, but I'm a little bit.
I don't have it right in front of me.
Okay.
I'm wondering about so what you presented last time was around the 6-month review process. Is that right?
Yeah, but we were thinking of that not as much as a requirement for the participant, but as like that every 6 months the providers have to review. I would have to read this again. Shelby is ready to read it right now.
So it was those who meet eligibility requirements qualify for up to 6 months. After 6 months, there's a standardized review process if the person remains in need of GA emergency housing, with an appointed committee alongside their care team. The purpose of the review process is not to exit people from the program, but rather to review what has been done and identify what changes need to be made or what additional supports could be helpful in order to address barriers that have prevented the household from being housed. Understanding that on some occasions, the only barrier will be lack of appropriate housing stock, in which case households will continue with their current plan. This would prevent unsheltered homelessness and increase support to permanent housing while reducing reliance on GA emergency housing.
And I think the idea was not to have that be a requirement that where the client is like, if they don't do this, then they're out. It's more that the providers are creating a client-centered really approach where you get to definitely meaningfully get together as a team about that particular client and see where there might be missing services or missing supports so that we can help to move people through a little more quickly. And this came out of an experience that I think we're having at Homelessness Vermont throughout this last 2 months, where some places where we've had a lot of resistance of working in teamwork, there has been more teamwork, and that is having some successful outcomes, surprisingly. So it's more, that was not, I didn't think of that as part of the participant requirements. It's part of it would be part of the program structure because we're thinking of it more as a program. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? Okay.
Nicole, why don't you go ahead of me?
Thank you, Sarah. I just want to better understand not the case management piece here, but the longer certification periods. The way that the program works currently is as an emergency program. When someone needs housing, they call, and we're able to work with the hotels to generate an authorization. And as Miranda mentioned, it could be for just a night. It could be for 7 days based on what the hotel's willing to take. Two weeks. Most of them are 28 days right now. I'm not familiar with any hotel that will take an authorization longer than that because of client relationships in the constant churn. There are so many households that are coming and going even within that authorization period. So I'm trying to better understand when we're talking about having a 6-month certification period. Obviously, we can't give someone the same hotel room for 6 months and assume that's going to be the case. Are we talking about really like we do an eligibility determination at the beginning and then we don't, the only thing we do over that 6-month period is just house them in whatever hotel will accept a voucher at that point? I just want to better understand what we're talking about in terms of that piece.
We are not talking about the certification period. We're only talking about that every 6 months there would be a review. And that again isn't a participant requirement. It's a requirement of providers really. And it's a program so that the programs are, so the program is actually making sure we're focusing. We know we have our hands on our clients because we have clients that have been in the program for 3 months, 4 months, have made the reach out. We've made reach out for them and nobody has met with them. And so this is a way to ensure that we are, that is part of the identified requirement for providers. Because we're not thinking of this as, we were not thinking of this as what it is right now. We're thinking of it more as a program. And we're not trying to keep it as it is currently, if that. And so certification periods was a different conversation. And also this was different than participant requirements.
So this isn't participant require, sorry, is this under participant requirements? I'm just.
No.
Oh.
We did not put this under participant requirements. We put under participant requirements, the budget language.
Okay. Does anyone have, I don't have the budget language right in front of me.
So this is like a whole new thing though, is what I'm hearing. Like it's a whole new way of operating, because I think you talked about this lot, which I do feel like would be helpful to dig into more. Because really what you're saying is like, there needs to be, you know, connections with providers. I think again, it's sort of, and I mean, I would be curious, you know, to hear like Amy or Sarah, others providers of like, what makes sense, and Jubilee, you as well, in terms of like legislating providers, especially if there's not necessarily associated funding for providers, or I know in some communities, they just like have not been able to hire staff, you know, so at one point there was an agency that wanted to have multiple people on a motel-based team. They were never able to hire up. So I don't want to, I just want to be clear what exactly is being proposed. And then if what you're saying is then, because basically you're then legislating requirements for providers.
I mean, so right now, the HOP funding comes with HUD requirements and other requirements for providers. So we're saying that people remain eligible for a period of time. We don't want people to just languish there. Nobody wants that for a variety of reasons. The most important one being the human beings that are in the program. And that we don't want them to languish there. And so we have to have an identified period at which we review all of the systems in place, that this has not worked as a program that includes a full, that type of review. And we understand that people don't have the funding. I believe in that recommendation. If we're talking about it, I believe in that recommendation, we include that there needs to be funding that's commensurate with this requirement. And this falls on someone, and we sometimes end up being the people it falls on, and we are not funded for it either. And so I don't think it's okay to say it's okay for someone to languish because, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying, Lily, just to be clear, but it's not okay for these participants in the program to just like languish in the hotels or end up with amputated legs or feet, which happens because we can't get to them. And so we have to make this, we need to make this fundamentally, and it is not the fault of these clients. They are trying to meet with people. And so we are saying that there has to be some accountability on both sides. And this is also a way to make that accountability happen. So it is a place where the legislature would have to look at how they're creating that requirement. But if people are using state funds, then I think it's okay to make some requirements of the people that are using the state funds.
And I know that in the bill language.
I did pull up the bill if you hear that. This is the household participation, right? That she was looking for.
It's a case management.
Oh, well then I didn't.
Okay. Forget it. She didn't.
Can I just jump in? So, I think first I would say, I do think that there are certainly requirements on providers who are receiving HOP funds. And those are at times, really challenging to meet due to, workforce challenges. I know in Chittenden County, for example, households that were enrolled in coordinated entry in May are still at this time being enrolled or being connected to a case manager or waiting to be connected to a case manager. And that is because of workforce challenges. That's not because they're the providers being irresponsible, not saying that's what you said, but
no.
It's not for lack of, intention there. I think that I think that some of the, in terms of like, engagement in case management and communication that happens on a local level here in Chittenden County. We have a weekly case conferencing circle with all providers that meets to, sort of, connect folks to housing related resources and problem solve difficult, or challenging situations or cases. And I guess the other piece is that I feel pretty strongly that households need to be connected to coordinated entry. However, I guess, Lily, I continue to believe that, this needs to sort of shift from like a motel program to, a more consistent sort of shelter program. To supplement the lacking community shelters that we have. And so in that light, I'm wondering, Lily, if you could share with the group, to totally put you on the spot right now, how shelter providers kind of manage engagement within case management services or within, I know that it's like a full, scope, but my understanding is shelter providers who receive HOP funding cannot require case management, but many through nuanced sort of ways encourage engagement. And I'm wondering if maybe you can kind of share sort of the HOP standards around that.
Yeah, I mean, I can link to them in the chat. But so shelters do not have to have a length of stay policy. Some do. I think one of the big differences is sort of what we're talking about right now is like just the connection. And I think one of the things that is challenging about motels is that there's not necessarily people on site there, and there's not necessarily that ability to engage, easily on either end, whether that's from the guest perspective or the service provider's perspective. And so I think that, again, the elements of a shelter come with a lot of requirements around, and we've done this on site at motels, and we have this ability to fund people to do essential services at motels where you're connected with a case manager within a certain period of time. There's a requirement around referral to mainstream benefits, looking at people's housing. I think, again, those things are happening on site at shelters in a way that is then inconsistently happening at motels. And, I think some of it is a funding, although I think the past 2 years, it's really maybe been more of a workforce or agency capacity issue in terms of that. So those would be the things I feel like that would have to be part of the analysis in terms of a review, because it really is heavy on having someone who can be available to connect with the person. And that's really a big difference between the shelter and the motel right now. And so that would have to be part of any kind of, I think, expectation around deepening some of these requirements.
So Lily, when I know that the field service directors had, I don't know what they were called, service coordinators or case managers or whoever. I know we had 2 in Chittenden County who worked with our field services director. When that was happening, did you see increased outcomes for households being connected to resources and, mainstream benefits that you mentioned?
I would have to check in with my colleague to get that information. I think Renee Weeks or Dave Regal have the outcome of those efforts.
Okay. All right.
I just wanted to say that I think the reason for the team approach is actually, it has an initial burden, it does, but we are actually resolving some of the problems. And I understand the group team thing, but for a lot of these clients, it's really more appropriate to have a meeting about an individual or a couple of individuals that those case managers all share. So we're not just having like a meeting about everybody in the district. And I think that's challenging. But there's challenges that seemed completely unresolvable. And we have asked for a team approach over and over and over again in certain areas. And now suddenly, because it's so critical and crisis oriented, in a very like fire drill kind of way, some of that we've seen successfully happen. And so we're saying this shouldn't be happening in a fire drill. This same thing that we're doing right now, because we're all in chaos, should be happening when it's not a fire drill. And so there's, and that has been, and then that person is resolved, like, I'm not gonna use the word resolved. That person has found a place to be, or we have helped them find a place to be, and then they are no longer in that program, and we are supporting them in other ways. In our case, in other cases, people have moved on to other providers.
I mean, I think I just want to be clear that we're talking about participant requirements, and I feel like the conversation keeps shifting to provider requirements.
Right. I think that's just because when you brought that in, it became the conversation, but we have never made that call that a participant requirement. I don't know if Frank was able, I asked Frank if he was able to pull up that part of the budget language. Were you, Frank?
I
Was
have the
that
budget up. What specific section are we looking for?
the one about case management?
I'm going to suggest, while Frank's pulling that up, that we take the next 7 minutes for discussion around this piece and then table until next time, because I think it's important that we get to the adverse weather conditions that we had on our agenda. And looking at the agenda, the recommendations and discussion we did, try to have some time for that. I think that this is no criticism on anyone, but I think that those recommendations, we need to have them sent out ahead of the meeting, with plenty of time ahead of the meeting, so that folks can sort of digest them and aren't seeing them for the first time at the meeting. No, again, we're all busy, so I don't mean that in a critical way. So I think I would propose, Jubilee, if you agree that the recommendations that came to us, we have some time to sort of digest and then begin our meeting next time around with those, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that works for me. We had some initial discussion and got to read through them. So I personally would like to look at them and just some other things I'm looking into. So yeah, I think we can all pick that discussion up around those recommendations next time.
And I think it would help if there's things that we're going to be discussing, because we have a whole set of recommendations we haven't presented that we put together, but we didn't know what would be discussed today until Friday, which is also no criticism on anyone, but it would help for me to get it in sooner, or whoever wants to make recommendations.
Well, and part of it, if you have things, let us know, because part of our building out the agenda is based on what we're hearing from folks. So if you have things you want to discuss, we have to know that they exist to put them on our agenda. So yeah, bring those and we can build that into it. Did you pull it up, Frank?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I dropped it into the chat. It's the case management services. That's the only section I see related to this.
I bumped Frank's notice up with the apologies that I need to step out, but it's just above my comment.
Thanks for joining us, Sean.
Thanks so much. I'll be there next time.
All right, Frank, so you put for case management services provided by case managers employed by or under contract with the Agency of Human Services or reimbursed through an agency-funded grant shall include assisting clients with finding appropriate housing.
That's not it. I'm so sorry that I can't see it, because I would then.
Is this in this section? I have the budget up. Just 1 second. Is it?
What is the exact part you're trying to get?
Notwithstanding any rule or law to the contrary, the department shall require all households applying for or receiving general assistance emergency housing to engage in their own search for and accept any available alternative housing placements.
No, there's one. Sorry, keep going.
Okay, yeah, it's not that one.
It's the one about case management. And again, I apologize, I can't see it.
Okay, so is that under participant? Again, I just want to be clear.
Participant requirements, yeah. There's one about case management under participant requirements. It is not ideal, but I think it met the definition of a compromise.
So Nicole or Miranda from ESD.
The House bill?
No, it's in the budget, and I think it's below the budget language, and I guess
Nicole or Miranda, can you
in there?
What is the requirement for what is the requirement for engagement with services right now?
Thank you. Yeah, so right now there is a housing search requirement that's in the rule, which I'm more familiar with than the actual language in the statute. And so what that says is that during the eligibility conversation, that the client and the worker agree on what that housing search is going to be. And typically that is engagement with coordinated entry. So it is based on the individual's need. And it is something that's kind of, I call it a task. It's assigned at the point of eligibility determination and then followed up on the next time the client has to renew their housing.
It allows for, it's somewhere in the budget, and what I'll do is I'll send it all around to people when I can see it. And it's very brief, and it allows for alternative styles of case management, housing search. It might be in that housing search part if I didn't let you finish it. So I'm realizing that I didn't, but it wasn't like a requirement on providers, it was like.
Okay.
But anyways, I'm just gonna send it around because I can't.
I really think you're thinking about the House bill, not the budget, because we did have that. I'm not finding it in the budget.
It's possible, it's a possibility. There's been a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that Jubilee from the House version as well. And I'm not seeing it here anywhere in the final bill.
Okay, so let's revisit that at our next meeting, when we have some more information, and shift gears a little bit to move into, adverse weather conditions. I think it would be helpful for us to spend, what is it, 140 right now? So maybe we can, have some discussion on this and, save about 4 or 5 minutes for a wrap up before 2 o'clock, if that sounds okay. All right.
Just letting you know, Sarah, I'm gonna just run out real quick, but you guys continue to help me.
Okay. So looking at adverse weather conditions, I think that we can all agree some substantial changes happened this year that included maintaining categorical eligibility criteria through adverse weather. I think another thing that happened is shifting to season long and expanding that season from December 1st through April 1st. I guess that's a little bit of the background. So where do we want to start conversation?
Did HHAB, I thought HHAB had some recommendations from our. Is that true, Frank?
Yeah, I'm happy to start there. Just 1 second. Sorry, can you all hear me? I'm having some internet issues.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So what we had talked about were a couple of things. One is trying to kind of rethink how we really kind of consider this to be a winter weather program, and recognizing that particularly even in the summers now in Vermont, the temperatures can be at a place where it might not be safe to be outside camping. And so kind of rethinking this from just the winter weather to more of a program that exists year round, depending on certain criteria, but having a solid kind of winter protection to ensure that folks are sheltered when it's not safe for the season to be outside. And we had talked about potentially making that coincide with when campgrounds close, which I believe is, I'm just looking right now, after October 31st and before April 1st, when off-season camping is closed, off-season camping, because folks, obviously the state is saying that there's issues there with camping after that time, and also their campgrounds are not available for folks at the same way that they are in season. And so whether that makes sense. So I guess looking at this from two perspectives, talking about the winter program, but then also talking about, should we also add in a non-winter program for adverse weather? And so I guess starting with the winter weather, if it makes sense to look at this through the lens of when campgrounds are closed, and making sure that when they are closed, that's when winter weather hits in Vermont, for purposes of all weather, and folks have access to the program. And by folks, in terms of relaxed eligibility as well. So folks not who would not necessarily be eligible under traditional GA eligibility.
So Frank, just to summarize, I'm hearing the recommendation from HHAV is to expand AWC from 11.1 to 4.1 and to include relaxed eligibility requirements. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Thoughts on that from folks? Miranda, go ahead.
Thanks. I guess I'm just wondering again, with this, it's opening it up more. So I'm going to say the word that nobody likes, but like, how do we prioritize? Like, or is there a priority, or are we okay with, there isn't enough space, right? What we know right now is we can't house everyone. So I guess I'm just curious about thoughts on that, as like, who does get in, or is it just first come, first serve? And then of course there's budget implications.
So I guess just from my perspective, following up on that question, Miranda, we didn't talk about the budget implications, because I think that's something the legislature would look at when they do appropriations around this, but looking at the room availability. And I think that also is like a bigger question of like, well, there's ways the state can solve that question, and expand availability. But whether we would have something like, I think it's in the current language, or was in the language last year, around to the extent space is available. So possibly having like people who are eligible, and then people who aren't eligible, and kind of tiering it out that way. But having that to the extent, that language that was in the bill last year, around to the extent space is available.
I guess I'm just wondering what, if you don't mind explaining more about like what you think the state can do to have more availability, because there's always like, there's a natural cap there, and it has gone down, I guess I would say. It's like, we don't have as many hotel rooms available to us as we once did, as you know, for a number of reasons. So if it's,
yeah, I mean, I think this is like a much bigger conversation, but my point last time around, you know, when they're talking about creating new criminal laws that expand the number of incarcerated people, the state never talks about, well, our maximum prison capacity is X, they'll just build a new prison, or they'll expand prison capacity. And so like, I guess, I hope that we can get to a place where we're talking about fundamental things like basic housing. We're not creating these limited, we're kind of thinking about it in the same way that we think about other things. So that the state can't take action to create new units, or to build more space, or to do a bunch of things. It chooses to spend its money certain ways.
So Frank, this is Lily. So I think, right, that's an interesting, I think, response. And then I think that just brings up, though, for this program versus other potential investments, because this program relies on existing motels, that is not, you know, inherently, like, so are you saying, for instance, invest in additional shelter bed, which in some ways then is like not necessarily an expansion of GA eligibility, but is more of a expansion of, you know, funding for VHCV or funding for Housing Opportunity Grant Program, like where you're not necessarily looking at GA to fund those, but you're saying, hey, instead we want to prioritize investments in this. Like, so when you say kind of mobilize and build, you know, like the state doesn't want to become like a motel operator. You know, these businesses are motel operators. as opposed, so just in terms of, again, where to see it. And I think that, again, is sort of back to Miranda's point, because if you're then not calling out an associated investment that you think is necessary to make it work, then it does become this problem that Miranda's identifying, that you have it January 30th and there just is a room cap, and there then is this dynamic of like, how do folks make those decisions?
So I guess my response is, I think part of that will be in our discussion around charge 12 around strategies to reduce reliance on hotels and motels. And I think that's getting into like the bigger package, like for example, last year that we had worked on that would provide the kind of 10-year blueprint for solving the crisis in Vermont. So I think a lot of that would be there, but also I think, what we had talked about and I'd mentioned earlier is that the language last year around to the extent space is available, it's something that we could potentially put in there. I just think kind of the broader question of like, it's frustrating that we only ever talk about limiting space when it's like things like this, but on other areas, we just don't have that conversation. So it's more of kind of a rhetorical point that I think should be built into our policy discussions going forward. But I do think, we, as I mentioned, the language from last year creates, I think, the opportunity to work within the framework we have now.
I'm wondering if there's several of these that just feel like they aren't, the charges are not separate. They are flowing in and out of each other more. The eligibility was more clean. But this is like, because there's several of them. We're also in our next one, I'm working on with, we're working on on also the strategy to reduce reliance on hotels and motels. And so I think that they'll probably complement HHAVs, but but I think that will play into this piece as well. And I think that there are tools. I think we have to kind of get away from, and then the other piece is that a recommendation we didn't provide this time, talked about habitability in hotels and potential strategies to avoid hotels becoming no new household hotels, and instead addressing the habitability issues in a more structured way. And so I think that also could increase some availability. So I think that there are places where we can improve, just like Jubilee was saying before, kind of moving away from what we can't do, but moving towards like, what can we do? And yeah, some of it's complicated, and the legislature and all of us are going to have to come and testify, and other people, and work on these to try to get to the right place. But I think the general recommendation of what should be happening for the human beings in the program is at least where I'm trying to get. And I don't know if other people are there as well. And I know that there's all these other factors, and I trust wholeheartedly that the legislature will consider those ones as well. But we are seeing what happens when we get it wrong, and right now.
So this is Lily again. We have like 2 meetings left. And I think it would be, for me personally, although I don't know what works for other people, for me personally, it'd be really helpful if at the last meeting, we're actually like looking at a draft together, which really means that next meeting is sort of the last meeting for discussion. So just a proposal, would it make sense to offer, and we could take this on at the state, but to just offer like a survey where people prioritize of the remaining charges and then kind of agree, like, okay, I can't remember the numbers, but like, we're gonna try by the end of the next meeting to have a resolution. It's not gonna be necessarily agreement, but to have resolution on 1, 4, 6, and 12. And then for the rest to say, there just wasn't enough time. Or do people feel like, no, we want to speak to everything? Because I'm personally feeling like it's going to be hard to speak to everything. And so I'm wondering if it just makes sense to see if we can get some group consensus on, let's try to identify the top charges and have that be the agenda for next time, and just sort of like say what we're not going to get to. Or I'm proposing something, because again, it's hard then, Frank, if you're saying this connection to 12 and I'm like, are we even going to get to 12? Do we have time for that?
I think it's been it's been like what people have brought in for recommendations is how that's kind of, like, we have recommendations, I think, are around service and proportionality, and that we worked on with Chris Flores. And so I'm wondering if maybe, despite how overwhelmed I feel right now, but there may be a possibility of us getting some recommendations in the next week, and that might lead, as Jubilee was saying earlier, that like what we're gonna get to.
Well, right, and I guess that would be the opportunity that if we did like a survey, you could vote for like, here are the ones that we're gonna make recommendations on.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, I feel like if everyone comes with recommendations for all 12, I just don't even know that we're
not gonna come with all 10. There's some that we feel like,
yeah, exactly.
dollars figure, we're not doing it. So, Sarah?
Yeah, I have three things really. I love the idea of a survey, Lily. I think that's amazing. I am gonna ask, I don't know how we do that with public meeting law, I don't know if there's any concerns around that, so I just sort of wanted to flag that, but I really like that idea. I think the other suggestion I have is that the 19th of November is our next meeting. And I can't even believe I'm going to actually say this, but I'm wondering how folks feel about a full day retreat during that day to spend some intensive time. And I actually would encourage us to all be in the same room together in person, to the extent possible, to really work through and wrap up, because I think, Lily, you're right. We only have 2 meetings left, and I really feel like our last meeting, portion of it needs to be feedback from other stakeholders who haven't been, involved in this, to kind of, weigh in before a final report, before we finalize any report that comes from this task force. So wondering what you all think about that.
I'm glad you said it and not me, but I was thinking that might be a good idea too.
I think we could do a survey as long as we publish who responded. So maybe it's not a survey, and I'm happy to just send an email and then have people send me their top priorities. And then I think we just.
I think that Lily, I think that the survey is great. I think we can publish the findings of the survey, but I really like the idea of sort of like of ranking and getting, like, to me, I think some of this is around temperature check, right? Like, I think that it's for some folks, it's not going to, necessarily be like a hard yes or a hard no. We talked about the like sort of, if you whatever comes from this, if you disagree, then you're welcome to provide, additional feedback. But I actually really like the idea of a survey, and I'd be happy to work with you on developing something to go out to the group prior to our next meeting.
Great.
I do like the idea of doing a longer meeting, and folks may already have things scheduled and be able to join for parts or jump in and out, but I can check with the Sergeant of Arms after this and make sure we could extend the reservation for this room to have it go longer.
Okay. Thanks, Jubilee. Is there anyone, we have some members of our task force who aren't present today, but I can, is there anyone who that would not work for?
So you're thinking like 9 to 4, like 9 to 3?
I think maybe like 10 to 4 or something like that. I'm not sure. I want to be mindful of travel time. And I'm also personally, I have to drop my kids at school, and I'm not sure I can make it to Montpelier by 9. So I don't know. Of course, if 9 works, then I can just be late and I'm one person, but wondering what other folks think.
I think for both, I think I'm gonna speak for Shelby that she has kids to drop off too. And we're coming from an hour and a half and 2 hours away. So for 10 to 4 would be better, I think, for us a little bit. Yeah. We were a little
Miranda,
burned out 9 a.m. ones.
I already
Miranda.
have afternoon obligations, so I would only be able to stay, depending on if I was in person and needed to travel or it was virtual, then I'd have to leave earlier, but I have a meeting at 1 that I have to be at.
Is there someone you can designate in your spot, Miranda?
I can work on that. Normally it would be Nicole. Nicole's supposed to be with me at the 1 o'clock, but we could figure out something.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay. So just in summary, Jubilee and I can send out an email to task force members proposing the idea of extension of our meeting on the 19th. Lily, happy to work with you on some kind of a survey to go out to folks. And finally, Brenda, I'm just saying you because not calling you out, but just because you said this, but to everybody in general, if you have recommendations for these directives, please send them to Jubilee and I so that we can build the agenda, and that will also help with some of the survey development that Lily and I are able to work on.